Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Dr. Downey and today we are going to be looking at Masteron. If you guys enjoy these kind of videos, please let me know by leaving a comment and a like. It really helps me out as I spend a lot of time looking at the research behind these compounds. But with all that said and done, let's get on with the video. So, referring to Masteron as Masteron is technically incorrect, as Masteron is the brand name for Drostanolone, the active compound in Masteron, and Drostanolone Propionate is what forms Masteron. Drostanolone Propionate can be referred to as Masteril or Dormostanolone. And drostanolone enanthate is simply drostanolone enanthate. That's just semantics. So, Masteron was developed in order to create a less virilizing or less androgenic version of testosterone. And when we talk about something being androgenic, that means it produces these secondary sexual characteristics such as a deepening voice, body hair, or hirsutism. And the reason they want something that's less androgenic is because they were using testosterone to help palliate women with metastatic breast cancer. And the problem with testosterone is, whilst it did demonstrate to be effective against it, it caused a lot of virilizing side effects in these women. So Masteron was the less androgenic alternative. I also want to address the whole notion behind Masteron being an anti-estrogen. This notion is always referenced in the literature by this paper that was published in Bulgaria by Marinov, and essentially all this paper showed was that upon receiving Masteron, those with disseminated or metastatic breast cancer had immediate reduction in tumor size. There are no actual studies demonstrating that Masteron reduces estrogen. And the reason it's thought to reduce estrogen is because it works quite effectively in breast cancer. But it actually works as effectively as testosterone, and no one's going to argue that testosterone doesn't have these estrogenic side effects. So later studies actually wanted to look at how Masteron worked in reducing breast tumor size. And because of the fact that it was thought to be this anti-estrogen, they looked at molecular biology. And what they found was that Masteron actually did not displace estrogen from the estrogen receptor. It actually didn't interact with it at all. However, it did have a higher binding affinity to receptor sites and to SHBG than DHT, so it displaced a lot of DHT. But this still doesn't explain how Masteron helps reduce tumor size. That led to the experiment I've spoken about before where Masteron reduced prolactin, and it was assumed through this mechanism that it reduced tumor size. But there are actually papers that demonstrate that Masteron is cytotoxic to certain cancer cell lineages, and some of the metabolites are too, especially the metabolites of Masteron when it is microbially or bacterially converted into some of its metabolites by bacteria in the body. If we go over kinetics or pharmacokinetics, there isn't much looking at Masteron. However, there was an unpublished trial done in 1976 that found that after injection of a single dose of Masteron propionate, the maximal concentration of free drostanolone remained constant between 4 and 12 days after administration, which is interesting because since it's in its propionate form, you would have thought that it would be readily eliminated. However, this might suggest that the body doesn't eliminate Masteron that effectively, which is why serum concentrations might stay elevated. The only paper that I could find demonstrating some sort of anti-estrogenic effect of Masteron was a paper released by Deshpande, who noticed a pronounced reduction in estrogen within these tumor masses in the breast. However, serum estrogen didn't change. Now, if we look at earlier studies where they compared Masteron to testosterone propionate being one of the hormonal treatments at the time for breast cancer, we can kind of see how Masteron works. So they compared testosterone propionate at 100 milligrams 3 times a week to Drostanolone or Masteron at 100 milligrams 3 times a week. And what they found was that testosterone and Masteron worked effectively the same. So why would they pick Masteron over testosterone? Well, in these participants, over half of the women experienced virilizing side effects in the testosterone group, and only the 14% of those in the Masteron group experienced these side effects. Now, those side effects are subjective, but these results are further confirmed by other smaller in vivo trials with mice. Now, there aren't many studies looking at Masteron in men, and I'm sure a lot of you are men and would like to know if there's any difference in men. So the only study we have was done using oral Masteron or oral Drostanolone at a dose of 50 to 100 milligrams 4 times a day, and the duration was supposed to be for 10 months. The patients, again, were sick patients, those requiring hemodialysis, and you might wonder why they use such a high dose. Well, that's because, as you know, if you ingest a steroid, especially an anabolic-androgenic steroid, it's rapidly eliminated by first-pass metabolism of the liver. So a lot of that compound you're ingesting doesn't actually get used in the body. It's just eliminated. However, when you use a very high dose, you can sometimes bypass this, or by overwhelming the liver with a massive dose, or by absorption into the lymphatic system. So that explains why they use such a high dose. The question is, was it too high? And the issue with this study is they didn't justify why they were using an oral version of Masteron. And as we don't know how bioavailable it is, we just know it probably isn't very bioavailable. What was noticed in the study, though, kind of confirms what we know with steroids. But of note was there was a massive increase in triglycerides in the people who were put on Masteron. Now, we know that most steroids cause an elevation in LDL and a reduction in HDL. Masteron didn't really do that. However, it had a massive increase in triglycerides, which is also a negative thing. Not surprisingly, there wasn't a worsening in their liver function, as this compound wasn't 17-alpha alkylated to prevent that first-pass metabolism, and only 5 of the 9 patients who received Masteron mentioned weight gain and an increase in appetite. However, this wasn't quantified. Of note, though, 4 of the Masteron participants and 1 of the placebo group had congestive heart failure. And the reason why this is important to note is that this further builds on the point that a compound doesn't necessarily have to be wet, as some might describe it, to cause water retention. So when someone refers to a steroid as being wet, they mean that it's aromatized, there's increase in estrogen, so they get all puffy, like with Dianabol and testosterone. But if the dose is high enough, there are no studies that prove certain compounds don't cause as much water retention. This is more anecdotal, but at higher doses, this doesn't really matter. And what is important is that androgens and the progestin receptor are quite closely linked, and androgens can stimulate that, and through stimulation of progestin receptors you get retention of minerals like sodium, and this causes water retention and can precipitate congestive cardiac failure. Now, congestive cardiac failure is not a heart attack, it's different. It's essentially where the heart isn't functioning well, and this could result in reduced ejection fraction or preserved ejection fraction, with fluid overload or no fluid overload. In this case, there was fluid overload, which is interesting for a typically dry compound. What they were trying to do in the study, however, is improve the anemia that these patients had. Now, it's a common comorbidity that a lot of people with kidney issues have, and that's anemia. And other steroids have been demonstrated to improve this anemia. However, due to the short duration that a lot of these participants in the study had used Masteron for, they didn't notice any change in those markers. The reason for the short duration is because of all these side effects. What was interesting is that one of the patients, who was a younger individual, developed a serious side effect from hypertension or high blood pressure, and it led to encephalopathy. Essentially, it usually means that blood pressures are so high that you become confused and you get these neurological side effects. So let's look at how anabolic Masteron is. And unfortunately, we have to look at the so-called anabolic table, where they used various compounds in mice and compared it to the gold standard, that being testosterone. Now, in comparison to testosterone, Masteron, or Drostanolone Propionate, they didn't look at the enanthate ester, had a similar anabolic capability as testosterone did. However, it had around a third of the androgenic ability of testosterone. So again, this proves that Masteron is not as androgenic as testosterone, yet maintains the same anabolic abilities. But it still doesn't explain how the whole notion about it being an anti-estrogen came about. And unfortunately, I couldn't find data to show why people think this way, other than incorrectly quoting older studies, which just assumed estrogen had decreased because it worked effectively in breast cancer, which is shown not to be the case. The reason I think people think Masteron is a drier compound is perhaps because it doesn't convert to estrogen. It's not a substrate for aromatase. It might be due to the decrease in prolactin, but logically, based on the molecular studies, the fact that it displaces DHT from SHBG could precipitate either higher estrogen levels or lower estrogen levels. And the reason I say that is because if DHT is not bound to SHBG, it gets eliminated quicker than the testosterone in your body goes under 5-alpha reduction as opposed to aromatization. But at the same time, if Masteron is preventing DHT from working, it could cause a rise in serum DHT. Therefore, testosterone wouldn't be reduced, and it would aromatize into estrogen. So again, it doesn't explain why it's commonly thought as an anti-estrogen. So in summary, Masteron is a anabolic androgenic steroid with the same anabolic ability as testosterone, however less virilizing. This is contrary to what a lot of people would say on the forum, as side effects tend to be loss of hair, lower urinary tract symptoms, especially hesitancy to go urinate because the prostate enlarges, as well as acne and other virilizing side effects. But again, this is from men, whereas a lot of the studies done were in women and showed that it's not virilizing in women, so it could be different in men. And the mechanism for this is yet to be elucidated. Again, it seems to linger in the body for quite a long time, although the half-life of the propionate ester is quite short. Masteron stays around for 4 to 12 days. And it doesn't seem to work like a SERM. It doesn't have any effect on the estrogen receptor. So that's essentially all we have right now regarding Masteron. It might cause hypertriglyceridemia, so increase in triglycerides, which again can cause many issues. Let me know what your experience with Masteron is, what side effects occurred, what happened to you that many others may have not reported. And I want to thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.